Welcome to the Freely Rooted Mama podcast. Where I am their mother, I make the choice. All right, welcome back to another episode. Today I'm going to do the request. I put a post up on Instagram of what you guys wanted me to do on an episode next, and this was the top voted one, which is our birth plan, reviewing our birth plan of Eila. So the first thing I'm going to say is that everything I'm going to go through that we had in our birth plan, you and your partner, or you and your spouse, or if you're doing this on your own, you really need to sit down and think through all of these things that I'm going to talk about and figure out what is going to work best for you, what you're most comfortable with, what aligns with you and your family's values. So don't just take what I do, make sure you go do your own research as always. And I do have a preparing for birth checklist where I list out all these things that I'm gonna kind of ramble off that we did for her birth plan. So if you want that, you can go to the show notes and download that list. And then lastly, I'm gonna go through, we of course had a home birth with Eila, with a midwife. But ultimately, wherever you're giving birth, whether that's a hospital, a birth center, or at home, just do what is going to feel most comfortable, what's going to make you feel the most confident, what's going to bring you the most peace. So just keep that in mind as you, listen to this episode, or you might listen to what other people have done with their birth. It really needs to come back to you and what's going to make you feel at peace, confident, what's going to bring you the most joy. That's what you need to go with. So, and then, with that, I would say really tune in to that inner voice that is inside you that knows exactly what is meant to be for you and your baby. There's so much information out there. So again, just go with what is going to be best for you and your family. So that being said, we were having a home birth with Eila. So my birth plan is listed out in 3 different parts. The first part is listed out with what we were wanting for her home birth, during labor and after labor, or after delivery, what I wanted if we had to have a transfer to the hospital, like if there was something going on and we had to be transferred to the hospital, my birth plan, and if a C-section was needed. When you're making your birth plan, make sure you make it pretty simplistic, like don't, do it in paragraphs, just list it in bullet points so that your provider can pull up the birth plan and easily see what you're wanting or not wanting to do. And then make sure you review your birth plan with your provider in all stages of the plan with your provider before you go into labor and give birth, just so that way they can ask any clarifying questions. If there's any topics that you want to discuss the pros and cons of, you can do that. So this should be done definitely before you go into labor, and it should be reviewed before you go into labor. So that being said, my home birth plan. So during labor, we did our birth of our son at a birth center, pretty similar to a home birth, except obviously we're at home here. So we were pretty clear on like what we did and didn't want to do. And with a home birth, a lot of these things are part of the reason why we did a home birth. So for example, no medication. Well, at a home birth, and most midwives aren't going to, they're not going to do any epidurals, they're not going to do Pitocin. So that's already kind of a given. But just for, sake of this conversation and you guys wanting to know information, home birth, during labor, we were doing no medication. So that includes pain medication, also no antibiotics for group B strep, which I tested positive for. So avoiding any kind of medication. I wanted free movement. Of course, we were planning on a water birth, which we did get to have. But free movement basically means I can labor and deliver in any position that feels best for me. Natural water rupture, intermittent monitoring. So just occasionally checking the heart rate and making sure that baby's okay. The other side of that is continuous monitoring, where they can put like a continuous monitor band around you. I only wanted the intermittent monitoring. I wanted lights dim, there to be essential oils, music, limited or no cervical exams. This needed to be a conversation that was had before, somebody just decided that they were going to do a cervical exam. Justin was to catch the baby, food and drinks as I needed, and if Isaac was awake, to have him be part of the experience. So most of that got to happen. Of course, what's so funny is then during the process of it, like the one that I listed off, music. I remember I had like everything set up for music. And as I was doing like early labor, I told Justin, I was like, oh, go get the music set up. And then like as I'm in active labor and pushing, I'm like, I don't want any music. I just needed to like tune in to myself and breathe and connect with myself. And so music would have been a distraction. But it's just funny, like the things that you list and then the things that end up not happening. And for us, everything was so fast that there is that too. So luckily I had the essential oils going before we went into labor, and the lights, they dimmed halfway through, which was great. So, and then after delivery, we wanted immediate skin to skin contact. We wanted delayed cord clamping, and then Justin was to cut the cord. We wanted to save the placenta so that we could freeze it, breastfeeding as soon as possible, no vitamin K. We chose to do oral vitamin K, no Hep B, no eye ointment, no bath for baby, and of course delayed exams for baby so that we as the parents had time for bonding. So that was our home birth game plan. Pretty straightforward. I think probably pretty typical of, what most people would want with a home birth. Moving into if transfer to the hospital was needed. So I assumed that if we were going to the transferring to the hospital, something was going on to where we were going to need some sort of intervention, which I believe is what interventions are there for. So that being said, in my birth plan, I had it written out that any intervention going to be used, Pitocin, pain medication, breaking the water, any of that needed to be a discussion between myself and my husband before it happened. So I kind of had that written out there. I also, kind of backing up at the top of this birth plan, I have that the hospital staff is to have a positive attitude and no students. Sometimes with births at the hospital, you've got a bunch of students in there that are learning, which I think is great. But in this case, I already knew that if I was being transferred to the hospital, that my anxiety was probably going to be up a little bit. And I wanted to make a birth plan around keeping my anxiety low, because we know that if I'm anxious and cortisol is spiking, it's going to be harder to deliver. It's going to be harder for baby to come out. So, keeping that in mind when you do a birth plan, what's going to that's why I say make you the most peaceful. What's going to bring you peace? And for me, I knew that no students in there. And then of course I want a positive attitude. I don't want any fear brought into the room. I don't want any negativity. My baby is going to be born in positivity. So I just wrote that up at the top. But going back to the birth plan during labor, so I still have no pain medication listed, but then like I said, I have that little asterisk of anything, Pitocin, medication, anything like that needs to be discussed with both of us before we go in. I put no IV, no continuous monitoring, again, unless there's some sort of emergency where we need to, then that's in the asterisk. Lights dim, essential oils, music, limited to no cervical exams, again, that's in the asterisk in case less needed. Justin to catch baby, and food and drinks as mama needs brought from home. So I didn't want any of the hospital stuff. We were bringing our own stuff and they were going to be okay with it. And then after delivery, immediate skin to skin contact, delayed cord clamping, save placenta, no vitamin K, no Hep B, no eye ointment, no bath. I added no formula and no pacifiers here. Just to be clear, delayed exams for baby to allow parenting bonding, and then baby to never be taken anywhere without mother, father, or someone from the birth team in attendance. Just out of my own experience of stories that I've heard from other mothers, I didn't want my baby to go anywhere without one of us so that we could fully know what was happening with our baby. So that was kind of our hospital plan. Now here's what I'm going to say about the hospital. You can have an amazing birth at a hospital. What I want to remind you of is that you are in charge of your birth. So, for example, if you know that you want to have a hospital birth because that makes you feel the most confident, that brings you the most peace, know that you have choices within that. So this, of course, was for me was if there was probably an emergency happening and we had to be transferred. But if you're just planning on giving birth at a hospital, you have choices. For example, the movement part. We're programmed to believe that birth is supposed to be done on our back, but that's actually the least optimal position to give birth in. Giving birth on all fours, kneeling, squatting, sideline are so much better, not only positionally for baby to come down through the birth canal, but it's been shown to you'll have less tearing, labor will be faster, the process will be smoother. So you have options of moving. Just because you're in a hospital doesn't mean you have to, lie on your back and put your feet up in stirrups. That's not true at all. So remember that you do have power and you have control of your birth when you're in the hospital. The couple other things, like you have the option of asking for slow and gentle inductions. You can decline interventions. You can decline Pitocin after birth. You can decline Pitocin before birth. You have the power to say yes or no. Just have those conversations before you get into the action of it. So if you're going to have your birth at a hospital, whoever your provider is, have those hard conversations. This is what I want. This is what I expect. And, if these things happen, then we can consider this. But I want to be in part of the conversation. I don't want you just to assume that it's okay. So just have those hard conversations. And they are hard to have, but they are so important. This is literally the most important day of your life, giving birth to this child, bringing this child into the world. Have the hard conversations. So that's what I'll say about and there's I've seen many beautiful births that have been done at the hospital where women feel empowered, they feel confident, they feel at peace because it's on their terms. So just know that it can be on your terms. Okay, and then last but not least, if a C-section was needed. So pretty similar birth plan as the one I just did in the hospital. The only couple of extra things that I have in here that are a little different. So during labor, I wanted no anesthesia. An epidural was okay, but needed to be discussed before, obviously. But yeah, I wanted no anesthesia, no extra drugs. I did not want my arms to be strapped to the table. I wanted a clear drape so that I could see what was happening, and I wanted a lower drape so that I could immediately have skin-to-skin contact after baby was born. Family is permitted to take videos and take photos, and then all the other stuff like lights dim, essential oils, music, all that's there. And then for the after delivery part, the only differences are breastfeeding. Oh yeah, the vaginal swabs. So one of the benefits when a baby is born naturally through the birth canal is that as they go through the birth canal, they are getting a plethora of bacteria that go up their nostrils, in their mouth, on their skin. All that bacteria is so good for their microbiome. And obviously you've heard me talk about the microbiome. I'm obsessed with the microbiome. That is one of the benefits to being born vaginally, is that they get all of that microbiome. So if being born C-section, what I wanted them to do was to take a swab up in the vagina and then stick that up into baby's nostrils, in their mouth, and on their skin. Sounds kind of odd, but it's literally what would have happened if they came through the vagina. So I wanted that to be happening. I wanted obviously no bathing or weighing of baby until we've had an hour or two of bonding time. I wanted to be able to hold the baby while I was being wheeled for recovery. Everything else is the same that I just listed in the hospital birth. So that was our birth plan. Our birth plan went, obviously we had a home birth with Eila, if you listen to the episode of her birth, and most of all of that happened. Like everything that was in our plan happened. So when you put this together, make sure that you list all the things, all of your concerns, all of your questions, review this with your provider before labor. And just remember that you are in charge. You are in charge of your birth. You are in charge of how it goes. And so do your research. Go through that checklist of items. Those are all like the hard conversations that you're going to need to have, not only with your spouse and deciding what you guys want to do, but also with your provider. So I hope that helps. If you have questions, find me on Instagram. That's pretty much where I'm at. Many of you guys have reached out to me and contacted me and asked questions there. I love hearing from you guys. So find me on Instagram, DM me, leave a comment, and I hope you have a beautiful day.